It's the SDG Podcast. Before we get started, you can check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com/podcast or find us on all the social medias, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Solution Design Group. We're back. We're podcasting. Welcome, everybody. We got Peter Lawrence joining us.
Hi there.
Chad Juttner and Camille Westfall joining us.
Hello.
From the UI, UX. I don't know. There needs to be more letters because there's user research, UR, there's all sorts of things. So today we're going to talk about cognitive load. And in terms of our digital world, Camille, how often do you deal with cognitive load?
Well, cognitive load is something that needs to be considered in every part of the design process. When we look at the design of a website or product, we look at the holistic view of how all the information, tasks, workflows, navigation impact the user's experience. And that includes things like how difficult it is to complete a task, how difficult it is to find what you're looking for. These sound like very big nebulous things, but in the UX world, we break them down into all of the different components to measure them as best we can through UX research and to ensure that the user has the best experience possible. So the goal is to reduce as much cognitive load as we can so that the user has the best and smoothest experience that they can possibly have.
So how would you define the problem of cognitive load?
So the cognitive load itself is actually a theory, technically unproven theory. There's a lot of evidence about, around it because it's such a complex problem, understanding how the human brain processes different problems and tasks. But cognitive load is defined as the mental effort that's required to process the information in order to complete a task. So the theory is that there's a limited amount of working memory, and when working memory has been full, like it's at capacity, the overload on the brain then leads to abandonment of a task or problem. So this can lead to things like mistakes or frustration or stress. And that, of course, is the problem in our digital space. Then it leads to things like problems in user retention, problems in efficiency and error rates, things in accessibility even, the amount of people you can reach, and user satisfaction. So things like that will be impacted.
Because
I feel
website
like that's
abandonment
my whole life.
You're just living in a state of cognitive overload.
Yeah, exactly. So from the development side of things, what does that mean, like, Chad, for a project that you're working on?
Oh gosh. It depends on what your role is, I think. If you're a contributor and you're a developer on the project, you're a contributor and you can focus on a single thing at once, God bless you. And I'm very jealous of that role these days. Not very jealous, but if you're in a different role and you have multiple things going on consistently all at the same time, then the cognitive load theory stuff comes into play, and it's you either get really good at it or there's no or, right?
I was going to say I want to know what the or is, because
I don't think there's an or.
Dang it!
Or
I
pain
was hoping for the or.
Yeah, it's just a skill set that you develop. Or you go back to just contributing.
Or you roll back your title set into development. Holy cow.
Yeah, and I think I take tons of notes constantly, and I have to switch between them to it's almost like computer memory, right? Like short-term memory, I have to dump it to a page, and then when I need that context again, pull that page up and be like, okay, this is where I left off.
That's how you're avoiding cognitive overload, is you're offloading stuff from your working memory, Chad.
Yeah. Well, have you ever, when folks, sometimes I have problems, so many folks want to bring so many developers into meetings, right? And I'm like, man, that context switching is really difficult for some folks, because you don't understand, it's not just we can start a problem, work on it for a half hour, hit a pause button, have your little meeting, and then unpause and go through it again. And the exercise that I give folks that think that that's easy is I just give them 5 6-digit numbers. I'm like, hey, let's just add these up in your head, right? So we'll start adding them, but stop really quick. While you're doing that, stop. We're going to talk about this other thing really quick, right? And then we're going to try to pick up again. And you have to go back and you have to start kind of over, at least from, the 1s or the 10s digits. You got to start again, right? So that's a great way to tell people, to explain to people how hard it is to constantly context switch, because that's kind of what we do as developers is like we take these problems and we break them down to little chunks and you get so far, but then you have to switch and, attend a meeting and then go back to that and think that you can just pick up right where you left off, right? And I'm not great at that.
No, it's not
take a few steps back.
That's never fun.
No.
Your brain is also processing things in the background, right? So you've got things like working memory, which is what you're holding in the front of, almost conscious, right?
RAM
memory. Sure. But a part of the working memory is also like there's another process happening in the background where you can push things. And that's when you're having a conversation with someone, there's your working memory like in progress. But your unconscious brain is trying to process like other problems, just like you're talking about, Chad.
Yeah. And I think, our lives have gotten so much worse because we have phones now. We have like so many little interruptions that are taking some of these, like not only am I picking up work and trying to get through whatever task I'm on, but I have to look at my phone really quick and see, who's texting, what we were talking about, pick up that context, bring that back into my working memory. Okay, now we're going to go back to work. Now I'm going to go to Slack, got to check Teams. And God forbid somebody send me an email. And then one guy prefers to text. So it's just, it's a mess. I think if I were to start all over again, or actually I should tell my daughter to seek a career in the mental health field, those folks are going to be, as we have more of these devices grabbing little specks of our attention, I think that entire industry is going to just become very busy very soon.
There's a cost to it.
There is.
Overloading yourself with information and images and all that stuff. And then, having a completely cluttered world probably doesn't help. But maybe it does, because I just set stuff aside and don't worry about it.
Really quick, Kyle, you just said having a cluttered world doesn't help. Would you mind turning around really quick and just observing what's behind you there?
Oh, my Lord.
A bit of a cluttered world.
It's a assault to the senses. So, I've kind of been in this state of overwhelmedness and trying to reduce cognitive load and be more intentional about things. But then the nature of my job is, bites me on that constantly. It's like I can't know what my day is going to be like. This morning I had 3 calls that were out of the blue and 2 people with issues and, an update call I missed a meeting because of that stuff. I was troubleshooting and none of that was planned. And then I did a laptop swap and a migration to give somebody a more powerful machine.
Nice.
So that's the kind of, you're juggling all that stuff and to boil it down into simple chunks and taking that time to focus on that stuff. I don't know if you've been in the office lately, but my door has been closed like a lot more because I've been taking that focus time to get things done start to finish. So I've got a workflow to build and a form to build this afternoon. And so I'm just unplugging and doing that. And then I will resurface because it is so hard for me to pick up where I left off when I get distracted, and then having that vision in your head of how you're going to build it and all that stuff that you need to do, you put that whole picture together and I don't really write things down. So then I get it out into the application, into Nintex but then if I don't finish it, then it's a 20-minute ramp up to get back to that at least.
Even if you had notes, it'd still be 20 minutes, I think.
Yeah. So
I do think if you took notes, it might help you feel less overwhelmed, during the process, right? Because you're taking that out of your brain and putting it someplace to go access it later.
And maybe I need to do more of that and just have a 3x5 card where I store this. It's like external. It's like a zip drive. I have a Jazz drive where I offload the junk. Yeah. So you're looking at, from a user perspective, an application perspective, I look at stuff I've built a long time ago and I made a fruit salad. That's got to be great for the end user. This page is just chock full of awesome. This is great. It's got everything on it. It's loaded. Now it's like more white space, less less on each page, but more pages to navigate through, wayfinding, that kind of stuff. So I find that I always want to add more though. I always have that impulse to do more with a page. And
Never.
I did the core values page, which is just the core values and nothing else. And I was like,
I keep clicking on them, expecting them to go somewhere.
are they blue? Dang it.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
But I still click on them.
So Camille, have you gone into a project and seen kind of the UI and you can recognize the page is going to overload the end user by now? Would you say that's correct?
Well, it depends. I am not usually the end user of the product.
Right.
So I don't have the experience that the end user will have, right? Knowing certain terms and things like that of these very complex workflows that we tend to end up on projects at.
Okay.
So I tend to lean on, I need to at least understand the user's point of view on the basics before I can even start to like dissect how well this page is going to work for their needs. That can look like a lot of things. It can look like a little bit of interviews with folks to understand their perspective, maybe some terminology, just a little bit of information. It can look as much as like a full-blown usability test, or even thinking out loud exercises where we have them pull up the site or product, click through it, and have them talk out loud about their experience as they're going through it. That's really helpful because we can see the expression on their face, the tone of their voice, the questions they're asking, things that might come up over and over again without even having to educate me on the process, right?
Right.
It's just a listening board to try and find, okay, where are those problem spots? Where are folks getting confused or frustrated or feeling the stress of a cognitive overload?
So your first rule of thumb is that you know better than to think that you know what the user's going to experience.
Exactly. Yes.
I like it.
Always the first rule is we don't know anything. We're just going to go in, we're going to start from zero. We have all these tools and methods in our back pockets to speed up the process, right? We don't have to start from 0. We know a lot, but we don't know about this specific user, this specific problem. So we have to understand that first.
So once you figured that out, you're in that kind of redesign mode of applying, tailoring the stuff to that user base. Is that a additional burden on your developers? And does that ever cause any friction? Have you convinced them that cognitive load is a bad thing? And I just wonder what those conversations are like.
Yeah. So a lot of the developers I've worked with, when we share what we've learned from users, it tends to help illustrate why we need to make certain changes. But in addition, I think a lot of developers are very minded on let's try to make it as simple as we can, right? And so at least a lot of the folks I've worked with and folks at STG, we don't try to make things overcomplicated if we don't have to.
Right.
It makes developers' jobs way harder if they have to make it more complicated than it needs to be. And so I have a lot of those conversations. It's very collaborative. About, okay, we want to make sure that there's the problem of navigation. Here's some of my suggestions and recommendations on how we might fix it, right? Here's where the users were really running into problems. And let's talk about that. Do we think that, where this proposal is going meets the expectations, will solve the problem? Or are there better ways that we could implement the same kind of solve that would make your job easier, right? I try to keep that door open because that allows us to solve the problem in the best, most efficient way.
I like it.
Kyle's going to just sit there quietly and let the cognitive load wash over him.
Yeah,
I'm just marinating in it.
What do you say to users that just, I only want one screen, I want everything there, I want, my job is super
Infinite
easy,
scroll.
I only need 400 input fields and then I'm done. And
Yeah.
I like them all
Yeah.
in one place so I can look at them.
Yeah, so I try to remind them that they don't work on their own. There's going to be new people that join and, people that retire and there's always that cycle. In a lot of the products we work on, it's internal tools at a company. So it's a workplace tool. And so that tends to help people get in the mindset of, right, my team is going to be affected by my choices or my comments here. And so if you can put yourself in their shoes and try to understand, okay, maybe you've trained someone, maybe you've trained a new hire. What has that experience been like? Has it been really challenging to get them through this process? That can help them kind of break out of that rut and try to see it in a new perspective. Because ultimately, we're trying to make it as simple as we can, but there are a lot of complex workflows in the stuff we work on. And sometimes there will be screens that are, more complex than the general like recommendations for an e-commerce site, right? Like that's not the type of products we work on. And so that's part of that user understanding piece of understanding, okay, if there are a lot of fields that a user needs or a lot of things that a user needs on a single place, like we need to understand that as much as we can so we can ask the right questions to put the right thing on the screen so that we can reduce the extra stuff, that extraneous cognitive load as much as possible.
I think back to like the Bloomberg terminal. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Bloomberg News or Bloomberg Service terminal, where you basically spent a long time learning all the cool commands to operate this input terminal for business folks. And I just wonder, like, part of the I don't know what this cool factor of it was that if you knew that, then you were special, and if you didn't, then you were needing to be brought up to speed on stuff like that. I just wonder does that ever play a role in what you're like? Are people trying to design things for themselves to be more special, or maybe block out non-experts?
That can be a thing, right? Like understanding, again, that target user group will help you understand how specialized the knowledge is and how much knowledge the person needs to have in order to be in that position. Versus if the tool you're talking about is public use, there's a wide range of expertise in that spectrum. And so you have to understand what are the ends and what's the middle. Like you got to get that full picture so that people that are very expert can still go through the process that they need to go through as quickly as they can, as they want to, and with the least amount of cognitive load possible. But also the people who are newbies and normies can go ahead and get in there as well and do what they need to do, right? Like we don't want to leave anyone out of these products if they are a public use product. So understanding that full spectrum of expertise that's required is important. For the products that we work on, there is a level of expertise that's already there, right? For a lot of these. I worked on a project that was very large and very complex and only had a very specific user group from within the organization. They already had years of experience under their belt before they got there. And so they already had like regulatory information memorized, for example, right? And so when you're coming in with that level of knowledge, as a designer, I have to understand, okay, there's a lot of knowledge here. I want to make sure I lean on that knowledge. So I don't feel like I'm not forcing people to feel like they are being like I'm dumbing it down, right? We want it to meet them where they're at because that provides the least amount of cognitive load, cognitive dissonance. So
nice.
So cognitive dissonance is when you hold two conflicting beliefs in your head at the same time. I think that's what that is. How would that translate in the cognitive load world? Like the page is trying to do too many things and they don't know what, like it's just doing too much heavy lifting and they can't decide like where they should be or what they should use.
Yeah, or so in the case we were just talking about where you've got maybe a level of expertise, but then a really simple page that doesn't have everything you need. The two things you're holding in your head are, this tool is supposed to help me. I have this high level of expertise, but the tool doesn't have everything I need. And I don't believe that it's going to be able to do what I need it to do. And that those two things are really hard to hold in your mind at the same time and can lead to a lot of frustration and stress. I'm sure there are people here who have experienced that.
I get frustrated with that stuff all the time. You're using a chat bot and it's like, what category is this? One of the 5 that has nothing to do with your problem? And like, that's your choice. And if you say something else, it goes back to that. Please choose something. It's like, no. And then I get frustrated. And I used to have a full head of hair. No, I don't.
Representative.
Yes. And so that's a good example too, right?
Yeah.
We've been like in a lot of these, service experiences that a lot of us have had. It's a call tree where you don't get to talk to a human. And a lot of times your problem can't be solved by the call tree. It has to be solved by a human. So instead of coming to that experience being like, oh, this call tree is going to be helpful for me, we're like, we know what we want. We need to talk to the human. We just need to get to the right department. And so that that already is another example of there's friction in that experience to get to where you need to get to. If the call tree could solve some of your problems, you might find some value there and it would be a less frustrating experience. But today, a lot of them can't.
Yeah, and Chad, that's kind of the goal with AI on some of this stuff, right? Is to you find your answer a little bit easier, right?
I think so. I mean, I do have high hopes for these, especially for call trees, that AI might make that experience a lot better, both on the on the inputs, understanding what I'm asking. I mean, those are some of the worst, right? With the early stage, like voice recognition, and then transferring that into like, oh shoot, the concept is leaving me right now, but the inputs into the model, and then also providing that call tree with enough context to give me what I need without, I mean, honestly, like if I can avoid talking to a human being, I'm all for it.
Right.
But like you guys were saying, the experience so far has been so god awful. And once I get on the phone, I have like literally zero patience for anything.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, like I'm cutting
Zero.
off. Yeah.
You just start hitting buttons.
Yeah, I'm cutting off the person. I'm like, and their cadence is so like labored. Like a lot of these things they take so long to say a sentence. And people that know me well know I don't have the patience to listen to the end of your sentence. I'm always like, can you just get there faster, right? Like,
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. Stop talking and let's,
And we can remove the flowery customer servicey whatever language, Hey, it's a great day. Thanks for calling us. We appreciate your service. What's your name? Like, fill out this form. Now, yeah, it's more of that. Like
the experience is broken, right?
point.
It takes you out of it to have had this frustration and overload of, I need to remember the 4 choices that were in that menu and press the right button or say the right thing to the robot, right? That breaks the experience. It takes you out of that mindset of this person can help me, right?
Right.
I think when you notice the technology, it's bad. When you go to we all go to sites, you go to Amazon to buy something and you're just using it. You know how to do it. It's easy. You're shopping. You're not evaluating the Amazon pages and getting frustrated. And I mean, sometimes, but they do a nice job of their UI, I think. If there's a snag, if there's something, a rough edge, something that you get stuck on, then you're mad at the system. Then you're mad at the experience. And you're not, like, most of the time when you're using your computer, you're in an application doing work, getting things done, communicating. You're not thinking about your computer. You're not thinking about the application. And so if you have too much cognitive load that's building up that frustration, it's like, now I don't want to come back to this page. I don't like this. I want this pain to go away. Who did this? Like, how did this happen?
Who approved this, right?
This industry is still young. I mean, it changes all the time. It's like it ages and then but it's like Benjamin buttoning half the time and then it comes back and then, you learn a new batch of stuff. You discover a new batch of like ideas and things that work and things that don't. A lot of our projects, we go in to, refresh their tech stack and rebuild an application and redo an intranet. And it's like, now it's the time to apply everything we've learned to date. And we can look back at all the stuff that's like, okay, these were problems we didn't know we had to solve at the time. So now we get to solve them now. You can do that without like diminishing the people that did it in your mind and look at it and go, well, this is stupid. Like it's a different mindset. It's like, oh yeah, that's when we were doing gradients everywhere. Great. Rounded corners. Okay.
They're back.
Yeah. So that's got to be a kind of a delicate path you have to tread.
Quick, do you guys remember scan lines?
What's that?
Scan lines. We used to make web images look like kind of like TVs, but back when TV had they weren't plasma or LED or whatever the kids are.
Right. They would move.
Interlaced.
So they introduced that television defect into your web images, and it was really, really cool in 1995 and 96.
I miss custom toolbars. I miss having the Yahoo and the Alta Vista toolbar, and I wanted this much web page to work with.
design firms
That's
like
coming back in widgets like on your phone.
I miss design firms like Razorfish, and they would always do the dumbest things to their website to make it look trendy and cool. Now everybody, it's just boring, which I guess.
Yeah, there is a fight against sameness, happening, I think, in the design world. A lot of us are getting inspired by Japanese web design, which has held on to a lot of that magic of, Web 1.0 or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's kind of like a maximalist thing happening here and there on the web. So something to look out for.
Back and forth. I miss the design firms like Razorfish, but I also enjoy things like I read a thing called Brutalist Report, and it's basically minimalist news headlines, right? Where they just grab the latest Hacker News headlines and TechWeb and all the other websites and put just the titles on a page. I'm like, perfect. No ads, no nothing. I can just click on the ones that I want to see all in one spot. So as much as I miss the crazy, insane interfaces of those old school web design firms. And what was there's one in Minneapolis. I don't know if you remember this, Camille. Yamamoto Mas, I think. There was an agency out of Minneapolis. I worked with them a long time ago on a project, and they were the same as Razorfish, where they just had this really dumb website, but it was kind of fun to look at in 10 minutes.
Yeah, and that's
until you needed a piece of information from it. Then it's like, come on, quit whatever you're doing here. I apologize. That started with scam.
No,
it's
all good. It's flowing into that discussion about cognitive load as well, like, because in some cases a super maximalist, fun, weird, poppy uppy type design will work for that use case if your users are only there for a few minutes, they need something simple, and you want to appeal to certain parts of their brain, right? That can work, but it depends on the user and the task at hand. If you actually do need pieces of information or to find a form or fill something out, that can be a real challenge to fight against all these, things impeding on your attention, your cognitive load. And then vice versa with the Brutalist news site that you mentioned, Chad. Knowing that your audience is just looking for those headlines, looking for really quick breakdown of information, knowing the information architecture that your users are looking for, then would appeal to them and get to that need as quickly as possible, is all part of that decision making around cognitive load. Bringing it all together.
There's so much I want to do now. Everything I look at now is going to be what's the cognitive load rating? What's the CLR on this thing? How can I tell?
If cognitive load rating becomes a thing, Kyle, I'm coming after you, just so you know.
No.
It's actually something that's hard to measure, right?
Yeah.
If you think about it, you can't really measure, and I don't think anyone actually has successfully measured what cognitive load actually looks like for a task. So we have estimates and we have Likert scales and things like that for how easy or how difficult a task is. I don't know if anyone's done brain studies on it, looking at brain images or brain images.
Everybody's different, right?
Yeah,
I'm
everyone's
afraid to do
different.
a real-time MRI of my brain. It's I don't know if I'm ready for that. To see that only this one thing is working, some little tiny sparky thing, and everything else is just we're just waiting for something else to happen. Or it's completely nuts. It's how do you even work with this thing? Yeah, and do you find that you get an eye for that type of thing in your own life? Where you see something that's okay, this is overwhelming. The way this room is set up, there was a feng shui movement that happened. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
You're not.
I apologize.
Funky Suede.
Funky Suede. But it was kind of around that. And there's also in the cattle industry, they've done a lot to remove hard edges, smooth out corners, reduce the cognitive load on the cattle, and so that they're not so stressed out. And then it's more humane when you don't stress out a bunch of cattle. At least I think so, especially if you're with them.
You're talking about Temple Grandin was the woman that she's animal rights advocate. And she has worked with some cattle processing facilities it's not more humane. I mean, it's not necessarily more humane. It's just she's designed a way to lead them through from offloading off of from the pens into the where they get the knock. And there's a way that she's done it so that they don't actually see what's happening in front of them, right? So they don't get stressed out before they get the little tap on the nugget there. And I think she's designed some of the same for other proteins.
If you can find the movie about her life with Claire Danes, it's worth a watch. It's a great story. I translate that into kind of the wayfinding experience when you go to a site, the ease of getting to what you need. And it used to be like no more than 2 clicks or no more than 3 clicks to get anywhere. And above the fold and all it's like, well, actually it's kind of scrolling is easier than waiting for a page to load.
There's no fold.
The web has changed. Right?
Yeah. And if it takes me 6 clicks, but every click is a win, every click is a step closer to glory and what I'm looking for, and I make it there, that's a beautiful thing. I'd rather have that than 2 clicks.
2 clicks to the wrong information.
Yeah, and then go back, do 2 more clicks. Yeah. So, this makes me think of my clutter and want to clean up my desk.
Every time I walk by, I think of the clutter and want to clean up your desk, Kyle. But that's okay.
The more I clean, the more stuff people drop on my desk.
It's just flat spaces for people to put stuff, right? And if you keep it full, then you acquire no new stuff just being placed there, right?
Yeah.
Hence, there's a lot of cognitive load.
There's a lot of places like ballparks and things like that have angled surfaces to prevent people from setting things on there. So then they have to clean them up, they spill. So those are like little problems you can see and fix and go, okay, this is effective in dealing with that. This is going to solve that problem. And so I'm guessing that this is not I'm going to evaluate something in a week and give you all the answers. This is a kind of an ongoing thing to keep an eye out for.
Absolutely. Yeah, because again, it's like this holistic part of the user experience. It adds up over time and throughout the workflows that people are going through a product or through a website. So if you have a lot of workflows or a lot of places people are going, it can add up over time and then you have more of a range, right, of that load. So
I was looking at things that are counterintuitive. Like it seems like this would make it better, or it seems like this would make it worse. They did a study where they had people read something to see how well they would retain it. One group had a sans serif, easy to read font, and the other one had like Times New Roman, and it took the people longer to get through the Times New Roman one, but they had way better retention because it slowed them down. And like, well, slowing people down doesn't seem like it's a great idea, but then, when you're designing a typewriter and those little wands stick together and now we have QWERTY and we're living with it.
Well, again, it depends on the goal, right? If the goal is retention, like that's one metric that you're going to look at. But if the goal is how quickly can we get a user through this process, those are different goals. So you're going to make different design decisions based on those goals.
That's something you get with user research is what are the goals that people have when they go to this place? For us, exactly. Cabin information, high fives, the latest video that was recorded that we missed, those types of things. It's like, yeah, those are, and I look at our intranet like a Cabela's, like it's a destination. It's not, you're not going to go there and surf the HQ and enjoy yourself.
I'm not just browsing the HQ for the heck of it. I'm looking for some info.
Maybe you want some logo wear. You can go to the shop page. It's all right there.
Logo wear?
I know, right? It's the opener. So Chad gets a pass. He's wearing purple. What is it? Fishing opener?
I believe something to do with the NFL.
Yeah, white space is another thing. It's like it's wasted space. It's like, well, no, it's not. It's actually makes things cleaner. There's some things where there's the most important thing people are going to do on the page, but that's not the thing you're going to draw their attention to first. Like, you want them to see the big red cancel button to know that that's there and that it's red. And if they do that, they're going to lose change. Something bad's going to happen. And then you have the submit button that they're going to find because they know they have to submit or whatever. Things like that. And I wonder if those kind of were discovered because of cognitive load, because of that user research. And it's like, we found that this is looks weird. It seems like it shouldn't work this way, but it's working way better. Like, do you get surprised like that, Camille?
Well, I think there is such a range, again, of users, of types of people that are looking to do certain things, right? We have established patterns that have come out because of great user research organizations, like Nielsen Norman Group is a big one here in the States. They do a lot of research across lots of industries, across lots of different products, and then they publish reports on best practices and patterns and things that UXers can pick up and use, or organizations can pick up and use, with the knowledge that it's backed by research. But those guidelines are that wide swath. It's not necessarily for a specific group or for specific use. And so some of the choices that are made by certain places might surprise me because I don't know the context of the goal of the user group and what they're trying to do with it, if that makes sense. So yeah, sometimes I see those things and then I kind of dig into it. I get excited, like, oh, there's a new pattern that I should learn about, and why did we choose to do it this way? Sometimes there's not a decision made because of research or based in, the decision making that's backed by data. It's backed by a potential, kind of just ego. Like, I want to try something out, try something new. We're like, for some of those more flashy firms that want to try something out, it can be an interesting place to experiment, and that's a different goal altogether. So. That's what I'd say. I don't know if I'm ever like surprised by something and think that it's the wrong choice right away.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe some cases, but I'd have to kind of dig to find that.
Well, there's I think I was talking to Mike yesterday, and about purposefully increasing cognitive load and dark patterns is what he called them. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, if I don't want support calls, if I want people to use the pages and instructions and confine them to my system where it's automated and it doesn't cost me much money, then I need to make this experience really, really frustrating and try to get them reach out for help. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult to get a hold of a person at a big retail site. Yeah,
so dark patterns are a whole other topic. We could have a whole other episode on just about dark patterns.
That's exciting. Now I want to do that.
That'd be pretty fun. But I will say that, again, it comes down to the goal. And in that case, the business goal is outweighing the user goal. That can be good in the short term, and it can work for a little while. But like I mentioned before, user retention, user satisfaction can be a real problem for those organizations that choose to follow those dark patterns. Once it gets around that a website is trying to hold on to your subscription through dark patterns, it can be pretty damaging to the reputation of that organization. So I just want to put that out there. It would be really fun to do a follow-up episode about dark patterns and the stuff that's out there and what folks have tried. Because it is an interesting topic and it's something that should be talked about more frequently. So it advocates for, user goals versus business goals. It's pitting them against each other when they don't have to be, if that makes sense, right?
All right.
We want them to work together.
October 25th, Dark Patterns, and we'll release it on Halloween.
Ooh, love it.
Yeah. It's a plan.
But I will
write it down.
I will take sort of a developer stance on some of the things where a lot of companies or a lot of teams that I've been on in the past have been very hesitant or even completely 100% against and would do anything in their powers to keep a UX designer away from them, right? Because they know they're going to have to make changes. They know that, it'll just be horrible somehow. And I would say that is a very big anti-pattern, right? Most of the time, the UX person is not there to make your life more difficult. They're there to make it easier. They're there, and 99% of the time, the flows that they're suggesting or the pattern through the site that they're suggesting is natural and should be easier to do because it follows the flow of work in the real world. So of course it should be easier to do. And I will say that, there have been times in the past where I've just gone, designer, what do we need one of those for? Or, UX, who cares? That it's just for these three people over there, and I don't care what their experience is.
This works. This is fine. This works.
Right.
This kind of works, and yeah. Go ahead, Camille.
Yeah. So okay. Yeah, absolutely. It can work, right? It can work without, in quotations, I'll put it, because
function.
Well, yeah, it should be able to function with a team that doesn't include a designer. What I will say is, there's been a movement in the UX world to democratize UX. I like to think that developers also touch the UX, they touch the user experience by creating the interfaces and technologies the user interacts with. I'm not the person that's putting it out into the code base, right? So what I offer is something that brings together the goals that the business has with the user goals. So like I was just mentioning about user goals and business goals don't have to be, against each other and fighting against each other. And that's one of the places that a UXer can help, is melding them and helping us find a place where both the business and the users are satisfied with the experience, in a way that like a stakeholder doesn't have to be in the nitty gritty deciding those things.
Right.
I've been on projects where stakeholders are really stressed out about what is our button color going to be. And like, guys, you can take a step back here. Like, we have the brand guidelines and we know what our UX is, research is telling us this is the direction we're going to go. And so what a UXer can offer is peace of mind to a stakeholder about those minuscule decisions that are being made, frankly, on the interface side. But also that ultimately their business goals are being, aimed towards throughout the entire process, right? From start to finish, from concept to implementation.
So when you go into a new client, do you do any kind of like an onboarding education session about like the importance of doing that and doing user research and kind of how you're going to roll, and what they can expect and things like that, since you've got the experience and they likely do not?
Well, it depends on the maturity of the organization. UX maturity is a scale. There's a wide range that you can land on there. And so I try to understand that first. Usually I'll come in with that understanding, and then it'll be a part of my process to make sure that I'm educating the client and the team and whoever is going to be involved in the decision making, but also the execution of the project, what my role is and what I can offer and what I'm attempting to do with certain parts of my process, right? So, for example, in UX research, often our process is to have a research plan that we provide to everyone who's going to be involved, make sure everyone's aligned on that research plan before we move forward with the actual work. And in that process of approving the research plan, a lot of times there's some education around, okay, why are we doing this? What's the value, et cetera?
Yeah,
I've actually got to work with Camille on a project before, and she's literally asked me those same questions. Hey, why are we doing this? Is there any value? And I'm like, Camille, we're at happy hour. Why are we doing this? Because it's a long day, Camille.
Because it's happy hour. Because there's a meat raffle in 10 minutes. Get your $1. That's great. I look back at all the intranets I've built, and when I've been the designer and I've worn all the hats, because they only wanted one, and that was usually me in the SharePoint space if it's front end stuff. So I was trying to educate myself on that UI UX, but a lot of these things are really full-time jobs, and a lot harder than you think to get it right. And what I noticed is I could read and educate myself, and then it came time to put it into practice or answer questions. And that's where my lack of experience at that moment was apparent. At least it was to me. But that just makes you work harder and, push harder to learn that stuff. But those back then, there was a lot of heuristics that were kind of pushed as the way to do things. The shape, the C, where people look on the page first,
right,
and making sure all the corners line up and make sure all the spaces are uniform and use white space. All those things I would do, but I wouldn't have the user research piece of it going into it. I do a survey, probably a bad one, But, at the end of the day, we got it done. And anything that really stuck out that was a problem, we fixed. Try to make it as simple as possible. You do your best, but I'm guessing if I went back, that's everybody. If you look at what you did a year ago, you're like, oh my gosh, it's horrible. That's why I can't listen to my own podcasts.
That's right. That makes it's a lot harder to hear what you had to say in the past, right?
So we're kind of winding down. Are there any parting thoughts? Peter, what do you got?
I don't know. Context switching, cognitive load, they all kind of play in the same space, and anything you can do to reduce those things will help you out. I think having a UX designer make things make sense and use actual research rather than gut feel, and we've always done it this way, is probably the way to go.
I mean, I'm always on my soapbox about UX research, understanding your users. We are not necessarily our users. But I will say, as far as cognitive load goes, I'd like people to walk away with the reminder that it's about the holistic experience. Every design decision you make will add to or subtract from cognitive load. And so if that's something that you're concerned about user retention, you're concerned about efficiency, you're concerned about accessibility, you're concerned about user satisfaction, it's something that should factor into your decision making.
Chad, what about you?
I don't have anything smart to say right now. I'm tired. Sorry.
I thought Camille just gave us the perfect ending, and I don't want to wreck it.
All right. Well, we'll edit out this stuff.
All right. Guys. I think with that, we can say goodbye, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Solution Design Group is a digital product consultancy in Minneapolis. Check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com or look for us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.